Right, there is a second cemetery in Belgium that mostly contains the Battle of the Bulge casualties, yes. So there's much work to be done, you know, in collecting these stories and photos for these men. And it's interesting, as Jim mentioned earlier, you know, he has a cousin, a second cousin, Jim?
Yeah, I didn't realize that when I was saying that we were having a program, and my mother mentioned that on my father's side, his brothers, my father's brother's son, Daniel Sullivan, my mother said, is buried there, or in there, and I said, oh. And then they come to find, and I didn't know I had a cousin, and I went on to the military site, which you mentioned earlier, and I typed in Daniel Sullivan, and by doing that, it lists all the soldiers who are buried, and you can find out whether it's Henri-Chapelle or whatever the other 9 or 10 of them are.
There's 22 cemeteries total that the American Battle Monuments Commission takes.
And then it indicates where he's buried, and then you can click on it, and it gives a basic information stating the name, as I mentioned, where he's buried, what location, and so forth. So, but the question I have, but I come to find out through Aimee, she contacted Caroline and said that actually, come to find out, there's another cousin, his sister and niece had visited.
Yes.
And when they visited, I'm not sure, but hopefully I'll contact too, because my father's, or my aunt, Marguerite, who's 93 now, said it was Janine Marie. So what she can't remember the last name.
Okay. I'll put you in touch with Caroline, you know, and then you can work out the...
And according to this, he received a Purple Heart with an oak leaf cluster, whatever, I'm not sure what that is.
Oh, so he's well decorated then.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. You said the graves are adopted?
Yes.
Or I shouldn't say graves, the memorial stones? Crosses are adopted by, mostly from the residents in the area?
It's Belgian and Dutch, and some from...
Now, is there I assume not every one is adopted, every cross?
No, not at Henri-Chapelle, but the McGrath in the Netherlands, they're all adopted.
So there could be a possibility that my cousin could have a family who adopted him.
Yes, and if he's not adopted, he'll be put into a group because his family has contacted the cemetery. He'll be put into a group that will be most likely adopted because the patrons are very eager to get in touch with the families here in America, and so some of them request to adopt a soldier, you know, whose family has been located and contacted. So he very well could be adopted already, and if not, then he could be in a group that he might be adopted more readily now, because you've been located.
What do you mean by being adopted? I don't...
Well, it's just residents who adopt. They become patron of the soldier, and they just visit. They just visit the crosses. They place flowers. They visit as many times as they want. They act as family. You know, and it's interesting that the couple who, the patron of my Uncle Paul, they have a daughter who's my age. And she was so inspired by us meeting her parents, because we spent 3 days with her parents after we left the cemetery. And we don't speak any French, and they don't speak any English. So it was rather interesting. But thank goodness the daughter speaks English, so when she wasn't working, she was with us. But anyhow, because Sonia was so inspired, she went out and she signed up. She adopted a soldier. It's Sidney Collins from Washington State. So she asked me if I could try to help locate his family. I said, well, I'll do my best. You know, I'm over here in New Hampshire, and that's on the other side of the country. But I did contact the library out in that town. I did order his IDP out, so I had his town. So I contacted the town and whatnot, trying to locate his family. So, but it's a beautiful program.
And Anzio, I didn't hear anything about that. In
They-
Italy.
Right, you might want to check into that, or I can email Caroline for you to see, you know, if that cemetery, I know Normandy has a program, on the same fashion, so.
Because when we went to the office, the military man
Right.
didn't tell us anything about that.
Okay, well, I can email Caroline and find out for you,
Yeah.
because it would be nice to have someone adopted your uncle, and I tell people too, it's not just members of that generation who adopt or who attend the Memorial Day ceremonies, it's many members of the younger generation too, with their families that attend, and they travel by horse, foot, vehicle, any way they can to get to the cemetery. So it's, I tell families that their loved ones are well taken care of and well respected, that they're not forgotten. So,
Amy,
yes,
on Miss Omar Nadeau,
yes,
that April 15th, 1945, that, I know that date from, so I don't know if that was pretty much close to the end of the war.
yes.
2
Yeah.
weeks
2
Yes.
weeks, it,
in the surrender.
and was that
Yes.
not pretty much I think, didn't the President Roosevelt die on that day? Or it was very close. I know he died in 45, but it's in April, so I think, unless, maybe it was
Well, it
April.
was at the end, Hitler
Okay.
committed suicide in
That was the
Louisville.
29th, I think.
Okay, so it was very close
Right, it
to
was very
the
close
mission
to the
that he was missing in, where the war was almost, as Bob said, was
Right.
pretty much to the end.
Right.
So,
Wrapping
That's-
things up.
yes.
yeah.
I do have a guy on my Vermont list, and he was killed in action on April 15th, 1945 as well. And the family was told that he was shot by a German who was in denial that the war was coming to an end. Or either that, or he did not know that the war was drawing to an end. But anyhow, there is another soldier on my Vermont list who was killed on the same date. But Omar, he was considered killed in action on April 15th, 1946. So they waited a year. So his official date of death is April 15th, 1946, a year after he went missing.
Now, you said that his case was looked into 3 times,
Yes,
and the first time they were looked into it, was it a normal process? But then you said there was a request for them to do another search. Did
yes.
that come from the family, or?
I don't know. I asked Mary, I asked his sister-in-law, and
Yeah.
she did not know anything about it. And his IDPF did not indicate who initiated the request to reopen the investigation. But he was investigated 3 times.
Is that a normal occurrence for?
I don't know.
No, okay.
I don't know.
Now, your uncle died at Remington Bridge, right?
That was Corporal
Oh,
Zeke.
that wasn't yours, okay.
Yeah, he
This was
died.
a good movie on Remington Bridge.
Yes, my uncle died at the Schomenwell Dam, just outside of Schmidt. So we visited the dam, and we had our guide with us, and he took us to a spot that anybody could go see. But we wanted to see where the 309th Company C was. So that night, we dropped him off at the hotel, and then we went back. We went back with our rental vehicle, and we pulled up to where the vicinity, we found an older man, a local, who was alive during the battle, and he remembered, and he directed us to the proper location. So we went up, the 4 of us, my husband and I, and my aunt and uncle, we went up and we went traipsing through the area where Company C was located. But it was I later learned through one of the reports that my uncle could have been deceased for up to 2 weeks before the regiment was able to get back to that particular spot to recover the casualties. So, does anybody else have any questions or comments?
Can you do basically the same type of research for World War I?
Yes, you can go onto the American Battles Monument Commission's website, and they have a spot for World War I, World War II, and Korea. Of course, Korea is a memorial, but yes, you can. Yes.
How many Vermonters are there?
There's 25, and I have 2 brothers who are buried side by side from Vermont. And I also have two brothers. There's one brother from Vermont, and his other brother moved to New York, and he was killed. And they're both buried at Aimee Chapelle, but not side by side. So I'm hoping that if I can find the family in Vermont, that they'll be able to help me with the other brother who's from New York. So there's 25, yes. There's over 800 from New York, and almost 900 from Pennsylvania, so there's quite a few. Yes?
When did you start all this?
I started this in January of 2011.
And you've been at it ever since?
Well, I finished in July of 2012.
Yeah.
Yes. And then I took a year. We had our second daughter, but I also submitted the manuscript to several different traditional publishers, and they all either rejected me or said, well, if we take you on, we want your book to be like this, and we want it to be designed this way, and we want to do this with it. And I said, no, I really have this design in mind, and this is how I want the book to read, and this is how I want the book to be done. And they weren't willing to bend, and I wasn't willing to bend, so I said, okay.
With all you've gone through, I'm surprised your hair hasn't changed color.
It's been a process. I work on this very late at night. Some people have said, you know, boy, you've really sacrificed a lot of time with your family. Well, the reality is that I work on it after everybody's gone to bed, and it's quiet. And I'm up very late at night. But it's something I really enjoy doing, and when I find a photo or a story, it really helps me keep me focused on my goal and what the whole overall point of the project is. You know, and I tell people this has nothing to do with me. This has everything to do with them. So after Vermont, I probably will continue on to Maine.
Now,
And then bring anybody else along who wants to help. Yes, Jim?
now you started the book, as you said, in 2011.
Well, I started researching the names.
What did you, I can't remember, I'm forgetting already.
That's okay, I'm distracted by the
Did
music.
you, okay, that's from a different continent. That's from Africa. What prompted you to say, what prompted you to look for your uncle, and then what prompted you to say, I need to have these stories told? Did something hit you? Or was it a movie such as Schindler's that that prompted you to say, I need to tell the story of my uncle?
Well, to be honest, Jim, I was driving home from work one night in February of 2009, and I had this really distinct thought and impression to find Paul. And I thought to myself, well, who's Paul? I thought it was somebody in Rokiskis, Lithuania, because that's what I was working on at the time. But the reality was I really knew who it was deep down inside. And I thought, oh, how am I going to do this? Because my specialty is the Holocaust and not World War II. And so that's what I ignored the thought for quite some time, and it kept persistent at me. And like I mentioned earlier, I was on the Arlington National Cemetery's website for a completely different reason, and I found the spot where I could try to locate a grave overseas. And Paul again popped into my mind, and I said, oh, I'm just going to write in his name and then just get it. I thought, you know, once I knew where he was buried, that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. And as for the other men, why I kept going, I do have to blame my husband on that one, because after we had our baby, I was bored and I was restless. And he said to me, well, why don't you research the other New Hampshire men? And I said, oh, that sounds like such a big project. But he said, I really think you can do it like what you did for Paul. So once I received the names, my goal was to just do maybe 20 names. I thought, okay, I'll just do half. We'll see where I go. But then once I completed Private Everett Wiggins' story, that's when I realized, okay, I need to not only do the rest of this list, but this is going to be a lifelong project at this point. But to answer why, Jim, I honestly don't know. It was just It was just a desire that I had to do it. Yes?
One way, I'll shut up. What are you doing with the Eastern European cemeteries?
What am I doing with them?
Yeah.
Well, what we do with those is that we try to restore abandoned Jewish cemeteries as well as locate mass graves.
Okay.
So I just started doing that, gosh, I think I was 12, 13. So that really, was my, it's all volunteer, it's all humanitarian work. And so I traveled to Lithuania with Dartmouth. And that was our first cemetery we did in Nuremberg, Lithuania. And then after I returned home from that trip, I just spoke at several different conferences. And my name got spread around among survivors, trying to locate and find out what happened to their loved ones during the Holocaust. And the next thing you know, I was working with Poland Jewish Cemetery Restoration Project, and we were lobbying the German government for restitution money. And then after that, I ended up doing this project. But I really honestly believe that I really needed to do all that work with the Holocaust to gain confidence and the know-how, so to say, to tackle such a project, because otherwise I wouldn't have even given this, or even trying to find Paul, a second thought.
Well, God love you for it.
Oh, well, thank you.
Any other questions? And I know if you go on the website, you can actually clip on this, I think Henri-Chapelle has like a 4-minute video. Which,
Yes.
gives a history and shows, and it does mention the pillars where the mission and action is. So, but
Yes.
then if you read, then you go all the other ones, and you start getting, it's just very emotional. Like
Yes,
for me.
it's very moving, and again, that's why I tell people, this project has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with them. So, but thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you.
And thank you very much. If you want to know more of the stories on the 40, it's right here in this book. So come up and take a peek and